Hello, welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Tuesday, the 9th of August. As I'm sitting here today, I was thinking about my devotion, one of the devotions from yesterday, and it talked about discerning right paths, and it quoted Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 and 17:21. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not return from it. So, and this is the author, Wynne Collier. This is from our Daily Bread, our little booklet that I use quite often. And this is from the devotion from Monday, the August 8th. I'd like to share it with you. It's written by Wynne Collier. No one would have believed 16-year-old Brazilian skateboarder Felipe Gustavo would become one of the most legendary skateboarders on the planet. Gustavo's dad believed his son needed to pursue his dream of skating professionally, but they didn't have the money. So his dad sold their car and took his son to the renowned Tampa Am skating competition in Florida. No one had heard of Gustavo until he won, and the victory catapulted him into an amazing career. Gustavo's dad had the capacity to see his son's heart and passion. When I become a father, Gustavo said, I just want to be like 5% of what my dad was for me. Proverbs describes the opportunity parents have to help their children discern the unique way God has crafted their heart, energy, and personality, and then to direct and encourage them toward the path that reflects who God made them to be. Start children off on the way they should go, the writer said, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. We may not possess vast resources or profound knowledge. With God's wisdom and our attentive love, however, we can offer our kids and other children within our sphere of influence an immense gift. We can help them trust in God and discern the paths they can follow for a lifetime. I love that take on that passage. I have way too often heard that passage being referred to as this whole, my kids don't go to church. And I understand that. I understand that my stepsons don't go to church, and their stepmother, their father, and their grandfather were priests. If we couldn't get them to go to church when they weren't living with us, what hope has anybody else got? Well, maybe that's why they don't, because they got too much church at home. Literally, not just this. I don't think they've ever seen this. But I hear parishioners say that all the time, especially parishioners of a certain age, say, you know what, I raised my kids in church. They were baptized. They went to Sunday school every Sunday. They helped teach Sunday school. They were confirmed, and then they started, became teenagers, and they left the church, and now they're grown-ups and have children and grandchildren of their own, and they don't come. And we bemoan that, and I understand that. I know what I get out of going to church. I get this incredible sense of peace, a closer relationship with God, the nourishment of sacrament, both the body and blood of Christ, that kind of sacrament, but also the sacrament that is not capital S sacrament being the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. And so, yes, I receive the sacrament in the official forms of things like forgiveness of sin, absolution, communion, and things like that. But I think I find sacramental living everywhere. All those places where I see indeed the gifts, the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. And so those are all things I get from church, and hence I go to church. Even on my holidays, I generally attend some form of church, if at all possible. And I bemoan the fact that my stepsons, my nieces and nephews, don't go to church. Some of them do, but they're more. A couple of them do, but they're more integrated in that because they go to the Roman Catholic school and have that. And also, my niece Danielle is just like, she is like the best little God freak ever, and that's a good freak. She is like the most in tune to the Holy Spirit, talking with God, relationship with Jesus. She's an amazing little. I think she's almost 12. I hope that never changes for her. However, for the most part, my family are not church goers. One of the things that I think this particular reflection highlighted for me is that that's not the raise your child up in the right way. It doesn't say they have to go to church. It really is about how we raise up our children and how we encourage them and how we help them to become the people God wants them to be. And I know I am just as guilty as any other parent that when my stepson was living with us, when Dan was living with us as a teenager in Halifax and then again in Ontario, I had these dreams for him. I thought I saw in him an incredibly beautiful, beautiful singing voice, and I really wanted him to pursue singing. I even bought him a guitar for Christmas one year when he was younger, and that didn't go over well. Although I have a hunch that if it had come from a different person at a different time, he probably would have picked it up and been a phenomenal guitarist. We saw in him, a desire and a real affinity for the military, and he was in Sea Cadets and Army Cadets, and that really seemed to be a place where he came alive. I think I pushed too hard. I think that we stopped listening to what he was seeking, what the questions he was asking, and paid more attention to what I discerned for his life. I won't lump my husband into it. He can speak for himself. And actually sort of pushed him away from those things, as often happens with teenagers and stepmothers and things like that. But the thing is, I learned, unfortunately, too late, maybe we can apply it to grandchildren someday, that we really need to stop thinking about what we have planned for our children and listen to what God might have planned for our children. I know that when I was growing up, my mother the church was very influential in her life, especially when I was a little girl. When I was 5 years old, the Anglican Church in the diocese, the area I lived in, ordained women for the first time. And that was like, my mom was like all over that. In her mind, there was no question. Now I could be ordained. I was 5. She was thinking ahead. And then she sort of kept that idea planted. And now it so happened that she was discerning the same way God was. And yes, it did happen that when I was 27, I was ordained into the church. But she that was her idea that happened to coincide with mine. What happens when our ideas as parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles or friends doesn't coincide with the idea that God has or the child has for their own life? We really need to listen. We really need to pay attention to what the child is saying, what they're doing, where do their interests lie, where do their natural talents happen, and where do they not have natural talent and yet have this incredible sense of discipline to do something about that. Because not everybody is a Sidney Crosby or a Wayne Gretzky in hockey. There are lots of NHL players, and indeed lots of players who just simply play for fun, who weren't naturally gifted. They weren't, prodigies on the rink. And yet they worked so hard, they taught themselves and allowed others to teach them new skills, that they went on to have either professional success or just personal success, enjoying playing hockey. Not because they were naturally gifted, but because they had a natural interest and were willing to discipline themselves and work hard into that interest. What would happen if we all focused on that? If we listened to our young people? Yesterday I posted a second video, my rant on ignorance and chosen ignorance, that somebody very wisely told me change the name. So I did a transgender part 2, ignorance versus chosen ignorance. And that's part of it is how much damage has been done to young people over the years, people who are our age and older, because no one listened to them when they were learning to articulate and understand their own hearts. And I don't just mean about transgender, and I'm not just talking about gender studies or, issues around sexuality, but anything. How many young women went off to become nurses or teachers when they really had a heart for business or for medicine? And they could have been orthopedic surgeons or the CEO of some great company. But because teachers and counselors at school and parents and everything looked around and said, but this is the appropriate place for these young people. You're a young lady. You need to go off to trade school, go off to your school, whether it's nursing college or teacher's college, and come back and get married and have babies and do that on the side. How many generations heard that? And how many generations who heard that treated those young women who fought hard to do a different thing like they were second-class citizens, or made it even more difficult for them to achieve that. And then that incredible achievement that it was because they had to work that much harder. When we listen to our young people and then listen to God and then teach them not about what we think they should learn, but what we hear God saying that they should learn. We encourage them in the ways that God is raising them up. We coincide or cooperate or coordinate our efforts in raising our children with what God wishes for them, then that would be absolutely incredible. That would be, think about the freedoms we would give our children. Think about the possibilities that we can't even imagine from these young people whose imaginations, inspired by God, could take on the world. I really do think that we need to raise up our children. We need to we need to start children off on the way they should go. And even when they are old, they will not turn from it. That way they should go isn't necessarily what we think. It's what God thinks and what God has planted within them already. Let's listen to our children. Let's take time to ask our kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? And if you're only in grade 5, like Allie, then she might want to be 3 different things. She might want to be a ballerina and an astronaut and a brain surgeon. Awesome. Awesome. And that will change 1,000,000 times before she's all grown up. And maybe when she's all grown up, that'll change even then. But if she's living into her passion, if she's living into who God created her to be, all of what she does will be a wonderful and resounding success, simply because she'll be having fun and enjoying it. So to Allie, my little friend in grade 5, to all of you people who have children and grandchildren and are thinking, oh my heavens, what's going to happen? Let them loose. Share joy and love and peace for them. Pray that they will hear God's voice calling upon them, that they will do what God has uniquely gifted them to do, and then step back and watch them roll. Have a great day. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.